This is a CNA podcast.
There was one day when I went to pick up my son from preschool, and my son's teacher had no idea who I was. "Sorry, and you are?" she asked me. It was only when my husband appeared that she recognized me. I was completely taken aback, and instantly the mum guilt hit me. It had been many weeks since I'd done the childcare pickups. I usually let my husband or helper take care of it. My husband's self-employed, so he works flexible hours. That means he can do things like drop my son off, pick him up, and just be around in general. I text my son's teacher and get updates from her regularly. But still, I wonder, am I that far removed from my son's life that she can't even recognize who I am? Should I be taking on more of the day-to-day responsibilities for my son? And am I a bad parent for not doing more? I'm Leanne, a journalist with CNA Insider, and also the proud mum of a 2-year-old boy. And it seems like in parenting, there's always that niggling fear that you're not doing enough of something or other. I started this podcast hoping to talk to other parents dealing with the same kind of dilemmas as I was. And perhaps finding some kind of solace in our shared guilt. And yeah, learning how they dealt with it too. But sometimes I find something and someone else a bit more unexpected. I'm going to start, okay? So...
You can go a bit closer.
Okay.
And my breathing is fine, right?
Yes.
Cause,
That sounds good.
okay.
It's just
Cause
me.
my wife says I breathe them hard on stuff.
Kris is a stay-home dad of 2 girls, 6 and 3 years old. And his dilemma is the exact opposite of mine.
Whenever the child needs a change of diaper, I'll be the one to change. So the amount of poop fumes I had in my nose were extraordinary lah.
While his wife's at work, Kris spends his day looking after his girls pretty much 24/7. And as we talked, it became pretty clear how much he dotes on them.
No, if next time she kills someone, I'll just let me grab my shovel or something.
But then as we started getting deeper into his story, things got a little darker. Kris began talking about the struggles he faced, and he got pretty candid. In fact, a bit of a warning here. His story is difficult to listen to at times. If you're uncomfortable with discussions about depression and self-harm, you might want to sit this episode out. But as I struggled to understand the things that Kris went through, it became clear to me that his was an important story that people need to hear. What were you doing at that point in time?
Actually, I was doing social media. Yeah, so it was doing marketing, relations and stuff.
A decade ago, Kris was living the life of a freelancer. His time was his own, and
That had me at home, working from home. I worked from home before it was cool.
Kris's wife is a 3rd-generation hawker selling prawn noodles at Singapore's Tekka Market. From what I gather, it's a pretty famous stall that's doing well.
She always wanted me to join her as a hawker. Maybe having children was the way to avoid that. Now come to think of it.
When their first daughter, Kyra, came along in 2016, they had to decide who was going to stay home with her.
My wife and I decided, since I'm already home and she has to wake up like 2 to 3 a.m., that time was 6 days a week, 2 to 3 a.m. every day. I think it made total sense at the point in time for me to take care of the children. I don't think we spoke about it much.
So you guys didn't really have a conversation about it per se,
Nothing
did you?
serious.
Or just-
So everything just happened. Yeah.
Did you know what you were getting yourself into?
No. At that point in time, I would say totally no. Yeah.
When Kris tells people he's a stay-home dad, most react positively, but also with surprise. He once mentioned this to the grandfather of his daughter's friends, and
So there was this awkward silence that he was staring at me. Yeah, it's just this very blank stare of absolute surprise.
in that awkward silence, Kris can practically hear them think, wait, does he actually mean he's working from home?
So if I just say that I will stay at home, then I'm doing nothing except for taking care of children. It's like this pause waiting to see what else are you doing in your life.
Doing nothing except take care of the children? As any stay-home mom or dad will tell you, that's a full day's work and more. Chris's day starts slightly past 7 a.m. when he hustles the kids into the bathroom to brush their teeth before sending them to school. He has to pack the bags, deal with a mountain of laundry, clean house, and take care of his 4 lovebirds and the household plants. All that before his wife gets home at about 4 p.m.
I think my wife is really much like a traditional father in the sense she goes out to take the bacon to get the bread home, and I'll be home waiting, disheveled, like hair messy, wet spots all over my body with a crying child.
Keep in mind, Chris's wife has spent 12 to 14 hours on her feet serving customers. All she wants at this point is a rest. She might help to cook dinner or spend a bit of time with the kids. And then she's off to bed, leaving Kris with the kids again.
It's still up to me to care for our children for the rest of the night.
It's really like a full-time job.
Yeah, it is. It's very much like a full-time job. I guess it makes me truly appreciate, especially mothers who have been doing this for centuries and to be able to juggle everything at home. And I believe a lot of mothers are doing even more than I do.
But life wasn't always like that for Kris. Before the kids came along, he had time to pursue his hobbies, like football, long-distance running, cycling.
I was into computers, social media, basically a 宅男 kind of guy, a nerd, into a bit of programming and stuff.
And also, video games.
I found gaming as an outlet because you can find pockets of time and what we call the PC gaming. That means games that really has you immersed for a few hours.
As an introvert, Kris needed this important me time to recharge his batteries. But once Kyra was born and he became a dad,
once a child came along, I really couldn't find the time to do all of that.
Chris's wife had gone through a challenging labour, and it resulted in an injury to her tailbone. She was on painkillers and couldn't move without pain for 2 to 3 weeks. On top of that, she was having trouble getting the baby to breastfeed and spent a lot of time pumping breast milk.
When the confinement nanny left, everything was left up to me. So I had to stay in the same room as the child and take care of the child's every needs.
Kris started to realize there was a whole lot of things he didn't know. So he started Googling for answers. Should I sleep train my child? How should I do it? How do I swaddle her so she feels secure? What is the psychology of babies? He'd do all this reading up in the middle of the night, in the pitch darkness of the bedroom while Kyra slept.
I'm hoping for at least like 2 to 3 hours of break so that I can read up on sleep training, because I knew that if the child doesn't sleep properly, I will have lots of trouble.
Did you do any of this? I'm sure you did, right? Before your wife gave birth?
I'm an Olympic level procrastinator, so I have to wait till the problem is right at my doorstep before I start looking for solutions. Yeah.
As a first-time parent, this was something I could completely understand. I wouldn't call myself an Olympic level procrastinator like he does. But I still ended up scrambling at the last minute, probably because I really didn't realize how much I didn't know. So let's recap. In the first few months of becoming a dad for the first time, Kris found himself on the clock 24 hours a day, not getting rest even when the baby was napping, and not having time for his hobbies to relax and recharge. It was like life was on one unending, frenetic, exhausting loop, and things were about to take a turn for the worse. Anyone who talks to kids regularly knows how much energy it can take out of you. Instead of speaking to them like this, you'd talk like this. If you're anything like me or Kris, it's bound to get tiring after a while.
You have to keep up that kind of positive energy. And I am not that kind of person. I'm this monotonous speaking person that will put my wife to sleep when I tell her stories.
Kris had felt it was important to build a connection with Kyra early on. It's why they'd ruled out infant care or getting a helper. But when day after day he had to keep up that high energy for Kyra, which didn't come naturally for him, it took a toll on him.
I'm always only looking forward to the next child's nap or bedtime. That's the only thing I look forward to and nothing else, because that's when I know I will have a breather.
The days blurred into weeks, then months of misery and
Not even remembering when was the last time I was truly happy.
he started snapping at his wife.
She would ask me like, are you okay? My reply would be very sarcastic, probably like, I'm having the time of my life over here. Can't you tell that I'm struggling already? So what's the point of asking me if I'm okay or not?
And of course, this took a toll on their relationship.
She has her own tiredness and her things to deal with at work. And then she has to come back to her husband who is so prickly and angsty all the time.
Kris thinks his wife noticed something was off and knew he was having problems dealing with their child. So when she could, she would help shoulder some of the burden.
She would, against her tiredness, she would find ways to take the child away from me, like bring my eldest out to meet her family or friends or stuff like that, in order for me to find a break. Or she would take over duties like putting her to bed at night.
But for the most part, Kris was on bedtime duty, which meant reading or singing to get Kyra to sleep. And one night, things escalated. His memory of the night is a bit hazy. Kyra was just under 2 years old, and he'd been trying for 3 hours to get her to doze off.
And she still couldn't go to bed. So she was singing and doing all sorts of things, very overtired at that point in time.
Kris himself was totally exhausted.
So like I've been trying to hold her in my arms and trying to get her to calm down.
But each time he puts her back in her cot,
Every time I put her down, she would start crying. And because of that age, she is able to stand up and protest about not wanting to go to sleep.
he was frustrated, at the end of his rope, and very, very angry.
I wanted to hurt somebody and it couldn't be her, right?
And that's when it happened.
So I gave myself a very big slap. And then there was just this quiet in the room.
Kris looked at his daughter.
And then she looked at me and then she just said, Papa do this. And she imitated
She lifted her hand, and just like Papa,
her hand slapping her own face.
watching his daughter copy that slap, Kris realized, in a moment of shock, that he was out of control.
So I opened the door and asked my wife to take over. And then my wife knew that I've been struggling for the last 3 hours and she couldn't do a thing about it. I think she tried. I believe that she tried to come in the room several times and said, why don't you let me try? I insisted that no, I will do it. If I can't put her to bed, then nobody else can at that point in time.
But Kris's mind kept playing back that image of his 2-year-old slapping herself.
Seeing my daughter replicate my actions is a mirror that I see. I don't realize that I'm doing it to myself.
The next day, Kris talked over what had happened with his wife. She asked him to seek help. He thinks it probably wasn't the first time she'd done so, but each time he'd brushed it off. And he did so again. But then, a few months later, a similar incident occurred. While he can't remember the details, he recalls exactly what his wife did next.
That caused my wife to drop everything she had the next day and then to drive me down to IMH. So for that, my wife didn't tell me where we were going until we were in the car.
It turned out that his wife had sought advice from a psychologist friend about getting help for Kris. She had also arranged for her sister to take Kyra for the day.
So that time I keep telling her, I have this many things to do. Like I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. We don't have time for this at all. But she insisted. Because she kept repeating she doesn't want me to die. I was like, yeah, just fine, just bring me whatever you want. I'm not going to care anymore already.
At IMH, which is the Institute of Mental Health, they waited to see a psychiatrist.
I refused to talk much at first. And then the doctor was asking the questions and my wife had to answer in my stead. So at some point in time, I think she broke down, which probably start off me breaking down as well. Yeah, so, and I think we spoke a little of what's happening at that moment lah. And I think I probably said that I'm just exhausted. Like I'm really, really exhausted. I have no idea what I can do anymore to help.
Kris was diagnosed with depression, and he finally got the professional help he needed. He admits that he'd resisted seeking help for a long time because
I really didn't think I needed the professional help because throughout all the depressive thoughts, right, I feel that I am fully aware of how sad or angry I am at every time. I do realize what I am doing, if not immediately after. I'm fully aware of my thoughts.
one way Kris had processed his feelings was to pour them out freely in a private online journal. Here's one entry he wrote when Kyra was about 4 months old. A quick note. While it doesn't get graphic, it does allude to self-harm. If you find this distressing, you might want to skip ahead about a minute.
To Kyra, my dear child, my precious baby, there are all kinds of love in this world. Love for a spouse, love for parents, love for friends, love for things, and there's love for you, my child. They are all different and yet the same, and if I have to measure it, my love for you is the biggest and the purest. I wish I could have found strength to watch you grow up, but I am weak and I found the easy way out of the mess I created. Grow to be a smart, responsible, kind, and loving woman. Be strong and be a better person than I ever will be. Daddy doesn't really believe in religion, but if I exist in any form after death, I will be sure to look out for you. I love you, my dear Kyra, my light.
Kris never went on to actually try the easy way out, as he put it. But he admits he did think about it during his darkest period.
How do you feel seeing that?
I feel that I'm reading an account from a different person. And while I understand fully how that person feels, I can also see that things will actually improve for the better, and it did.
Indeed, with the help of medication, things really did start to slowly look up for Kris. He began to feel something other than hopelessness.
I think the good thing about being able to feel happiness is that children are a big source of happiness. The sheer unadulterated joy that they have is very infectious. But when I'm depressed, I can't feel it. Like it will be a very short moment and then you're just down there for a long period of time. So with the medication, I'm able to feel those joys.
Things got better, especially when Kyra started school, and Kris had more time for himself. That was when his wife asked if he was ready for a second child. She had come from a large, supportive family and had always wanted 4 children.
Actually, I'm okay with having one child at that point in time because I know how much it hurts. But my wife being positive, seeing me behaving normally, as normal would go. So it was then that she brought that to me, like, let's have another one, because she was keep telling me like the lone child would be very bad. Like she was no one to be with, and then I relented lah.
Their second daughter, Ella, was born in October 2019, and
It was only after having a second child I realized such an angel my first child was. If the first one was that good and I was already struggling, this second one would definitely kill me. That's why the running joke at that time was like the first one didn't do its job. That's why we had the second child to finish the job. Like it's an assassination attempt.
coupled with the pandemic and being stuck at home, Kris found himself struggling again. At some points,
My medication went up to 3 times as much as before, and I still wasn't doing that well.
so he started looking into therapy. He got referred to a psychologist who helped him understand himself better.
I think sleep was the biggest trigger throughout the years, I realized. That means if the child isn't sleeping or napping properly, I will be very triggered by it.
Kris also became more aware of what he calls the hidden struggle he'd had with his father. His dad had been absent when he was young, and
I truly didn't want to become someone like him. So I think it set a lot of expectations for myself when I become a father. It's very hard for me to meet it when I set very high expectations for myself.
Kris also learned to talk more openly about his feelings, especially with his wife.
Whatever I discussed with my therapist, I would go home and recount to her what I said. So it becomes, I help to move it to a third person perspective instead of telling her of her issues that I need her to work on.
So instead of telling his wife, "I need you to help me with the children more," he'd say, "I realized during therapy that it is helpful for me if you did this."
I realize whenever I am speaking more openly about such stuff, then yes, there's a continued response from her to help with my situation.
With his wife stepping up to help out more, Kris's frame of mind improved. But here's the thing. The issue with depression, as Kris tells me, is that it doesn't go away permanently.
I'm still struggling with the exact same things that gave me very bad depressive episodes before. But now I'm dealing it with a different perspective, different energy going into it. I know I am more aware when things get bad. And I have more tools in my arsenal to deal with it early before it gets worse.
There are still days when he loses his cool with his children.
Especially with my second child, where she's really not behaving, or if they are fighting in a very bad way, I would shout, but I will regret almost immediately after.
And there are also the days when he wonders,
like, am I a bad parent? Like, I'm supposed to feel happy with them. Like, there are bundles of joys. Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, why do I resent spending time with them that much?
but through the highs and lows, he can see his own growth as a dad.
I understood that I'm not a bad parent because despite my struggles, I'm still here and helping them in every way I can. Now I know despite struggling that much, I still love them extremely. It's just in me to not be able to spend a crazy amount of time with them.
By sharing his story, Kris wants to make it clear that it's okay to struggle.
It's not that you should try to struggle all the time, but if there's a struggle in it, I think it makes it more beautiful. Like, I really struggle with my children. So the way they show love for me, it makes things worthwhile. It's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel anger. But after feeling it, then what do you do with it? If you do nothing with it, if you dwell in it, that's when it's not correct. If you need to get over it, and if you can't get over it, then you need to seek medical help for it.
Kris's story stuck with me for a while. As a wife myself, I wondered, what could I do to spot the signs of burnout in my spouse? Or to prevent it from happening in the first place? Or what if I'm the one who's feeling a little overwhelmed? So I reached out to Dr. Annabelle Chow. As a clinical psychologist and parent of 2 young children herself, I thought she could tell me about the early warning signs of burnout.
Probably the easiest sign that most burnt out parents can recognize is when you think of your kids, you either sigh or you want to do other things, or you are doing a lot of things so that you don't have to get back to them.
Other common signs of burnout include losing interest in things you normally enjoy. It may also be difficult for you to get out of bed.
And it feels like no matter how much you sleep, it's not enough, or you might end up oversleeping. You might feel very, very irritable.
She says that all this frustration and anger we feel could be telling us that something important is missing.
That we've got needs that are not met. So I need to feel like a person, right? I need to feel like something beyond just being a mom. I have needs to be clean. I want to take a shower that I don't have to rush through. I have needs of like comfort. I want to be in comfortable clothes that don't smell like their vomit, or, I want to have space that they're not always touching me and holding me. So I have my needs. And if my needs are not met, then I develop feelings of anger and resentment and stress and guilt and all of this. Then they come out in behaviors. So the first thing I would say is be aware of what those unmet needs are.
And once you acknowledge them,
Once you identify the feelings and the needs that are not met, then have conversations with your partner or your family or your helper to see how everyone can work around it and support each other.
Annabelle recommends that the first person we turn to for help should always be our spouse.
So don't assume that your spouse does not want to help you or is just leaving you to do this all by yourself. So I will use I statements instead of you. So the example by extension would be, I really need some time off from putting the kids to sleep. I'm very burnt out. So don't start with blaming, you statements. You never help out. You've never done it before, because then you are not going to end up problem solving. Remember, you're a tired parent. You don't have time for additional fights, right?
But what if my spouse is the one I'm worried about? How can I have that conversation with him?
I will first ask, what's going on with you. Then subsequently, I would express concern. I say, I'm just getting a bit concerned. I have observed, for example, I've observed that you've been drinking a lot more. I've observed that, you haven't really been sleeping very well. I've observed that you've been a little bit short with the kids recently, that, you've been a bit more irritable. What's happening, right? And then again, I will wait and see what my partner might say. And then I would express concern, I'm really concerned that, whether you are burnt out from, being around the kids, and is there anything that I can do to help you? Do you want to talk about it?
If your spouse says no at that point, you may not want to press the issue. Instead, Annabelle says, tell them,
that's okay. I respect your decision, but do know that whenever you want to talk about it, I'm here. I'm here to listen, and I'm here. We are a team, and I'm going to be here every step of the way.
If you or your loved one is struggling to cope, do remember that help is out there. There are helplines you can call and organizations you can contact. Details of some of these are in the episode description. You don't have to do this alone. As for Kris, he's doing better these days. There's just one final twist to his story before we go. A snipping off of a loose end, so to speak. After Ella was born, Kris decided to go for a vasectomy.
So I mentioned my wife wanted 4 children. No way I'm having 4 children. Yeah, so 2 didn't kill me, so let's leave it at 2. We wouldn't want to try a third one already. I think my wife understands that as well. Especially the time when I was struggling, I knew, I really have to go for a vasectomy to stop this from happening again.
He says his wife was absolutely fine with the procedure. In fact, she speaks about it with pride to her friends.
That's a stance now. When you're done with children, just go and do it.
Can you relate to Kris's story? What are some of the other things you've done that make you wonder if you're getting the parenting thing wrong? I want to hear from you. Record a message of yourself talking about it and send it to us at cnainsider@mediacorp.com.sg. We might just play it in a future podcast. I'm Lian Chia, and this has been Imperfect, a podcast by CNA Insider. It's sound engineered by Jonathan Yeo, with intern assistance from Kris Tan and input from supervising editor Yvonne Lim and senior editor Crispina Robert.